Hey everybody, Matias here, also known as Realm Builder Guy. Welcome back to the channel. Today, it's a little bit something different here on the channel. I am going to talk about something near and dear to my heart. As all of you know, I'm a big fan of tabletop role-playing games, and as some of you may know, I've been working on my own game for about a year and a half, 2 years. The synthesis came about 2 years ago, and over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, I've been working a lot on it. And now I recently put out the first broader playtest packet. Link's down in the description. It's on Patreon, but not behind any paywall or anything. You can just grab it for free and check it out. So today, what I want to do is kind of talk about the setting and the tone and inspiration behind my game, Darkness of Ur. So here you can see the overall setting, the map, very, very rough map that I've created using Wonderdraft of the setting of Urland, as I'm calling it. So first of all, I want to talk about the name Darkness of Ur. Ur has nothing to do with an ancient Mesopotamian city of Ur, and it has more to do with the German prefix of Ur. Ur meaning old, ancient, great. So old growth forest is Urwald, as an example. Great grandfather is Urgroßvater, and things like that. So it's denoting ancient and old. And the reason why it's going German is because I am both American and German. This is a little bit of an homage to Germany and Central Europe and our folklores and folk tales and monsters and myths and everything that has to do with Germany. So a lot of this is going to be very Germanic in tone and nature, naming conventions of people and places, and a play on words with some of the names of creatures and ancestries and things like that. Now, before I talk a little bit about the setting, I want to talk about the tone and inspiration. So Darkness of Ur is, I would say, a grimdark fantasy tabletop role-playing game. If you think about kind of inspirations, think The Three Musketeers, the book version, meaning The Witcher, the book version, with strong undertones of the great horror movie, The Witch. Now, you can even go and think about the movie The Village from a premise. Not necessarily the movie itself. I wasn't a huge fan, but the premise of it is that these are people that are behind a perceived safe area with a dark and dangerous world just beyond that safe area. So the other inspirational aspects of Darkness of Ur are coming from the 17th century in Central Europe. That is an area that was a focus of my studies as an historian, specifically around the 30 Years' War. And everything, honestly, horrible that was around the 17th century. So we're thinking about, major war, societal upheaval, religious conflict, the plague, the tiny ice age. I mean, people were freezing to death on the streets or in the woods in August and July in the mid-17th century. It got that extremely cold. You think about some of those 17th century paintings out of the Netherlands where people are ice skating on ponds everywhere. That really came out of that tiny ice age period. Same with paintings you would see of people ice skating on the Thames River in London, something you would never imagine would happen nowadays during this tiny ice age period of roughly 400 or 500 years from the 1300s to the mid 1800s. Really was at its peak here in the 17th century. Some of the glaciers found in the Grand Teton National Park are from the 17th century. So all of this combined with the fact that this was also a deeply superstitious time period, kind of thinking about the peak of, say, the persecution of witches came in the 17th century. Myths, folklore, monster beliefs, all of that really tied in. And I wanted to bring it into this setting. Also, not just have another sword and board fantasy setting, but a fantasy setting where, you've got flintlock, matchlock, firearms, pole arms are big, and kind of the way society was formed in that time. Mixtures of, deep mercantilist societies, republic societies, and then, of course, the absolutist monarchies, all of that kind of combined and condensed into one smaller geographic area and a place where you can go on some interesting adventures. So this is about exploration, survival, fantasy, and horror elements. I mean, some of the creatures that you will find in Darkness of Ur are pretty nasty, and nightmare inspiring. And I kind of want to put that all in one setting. Now, that doesn't mean you're without hope. It's a darker setting, but the adventurers, is what I'm calling player characters, they are a sign of hope and people looking to recapture things that were lost. So that really brings me into the setting now. Now here you can see the overall map that I created. It's not an overly particularly great looking map, but I took Wonderdraft and kind of outlined it. Once the game is at a place where I want to publish it, I will probably be commissioning someone who's actually really good at this stuff to make a map here. There's also a hex map version of this because hex crawling is a key component in this game as far as wilderness travel and survival goes. I think hex crawling is very, very important. Now, the setting itself, like I said, it's analogous to, it's an analog, would be the better version of words, to 17th century Central Europe. And you can even see that here in some of the names of the places like Great Brook, Eschenfurt, Schorheim, Raxhafen, Borenburg, Buchtdorf. So there are immediate connotations of Germany and Central Europe. Now, the premise of where you as an adventurer start with here is this is about 50 years post major apocalypse. Think back 50 years, and if you're going to think of it in terms of our world time frame, look at the end of the 16th century, the age of exploration, the 1580s. Think of it that way. And this entire area you see here, all the way to the Kalaren Mountains, was part of the Empire of Urland. The inhabitants here are known as Urlanders. And the emperor at the time wanted to launch a grand expedition going beyond the mountains and beyond the Aelen Gate Pass into a region known as Alturia. And here, of course, I'm using Alt and Ur, so super old. Basically, Alt meaning old in German and Ur meaning even older than old, so super old. Where here you have some of those ancestries that are more fae-like in nature, and giants and dragons and all that are beyond the Kalaren Mountains and Aelen Gate Pass. The Aelen are a ancestry that you can play in the world. Think of them as, and I took the name inspiration a little bit from Gallic and German, almost elf-like in nature. And they guarded this pass, and there was trade going through here, and most of the Aelen, the Mosmas, and so on lived past here in Alturia. The dwarf analogy that had lived in the Barrow Hills got pushed out into Alturia after a battle with a king of Urland. This is kind of symbolic of the battle in Switzerland, in the Swiss Alps, between a human king and a dwarf king, and for victory and hegemony in the Alps. So taking that here in the Barrow Hills, kind of the same thing happened. They got pushed out. But either way, the Emperor of Urland at the time wanted this grand expedition, and one of the chiefs or leaders here of the Aelen said, don't go past. It is a dangerous place. And he, in his hubris, the Emperor went, no, we are going. They did go into Alturia and were lost. Nobody knew where they were, but something happened in Alturia. And even though I know what happened, you as the player, and even as the GM initially, don't really know. But something was unleashed. And what was unleashed was known as the Grimm. And yes, darkness here, and a little bit of play on words on the brothers Grimm. And the Grimm was unleashed. And what this basically meant was there was magic in the world. Low magic, but there was magic. This magic got enhanced. More people were able to tap into it, but became wild and unpredictable, which I also replicate in the mechanics of the game. Along with that, certain mythological species and creatures returned or came and they didn't know they existed or became more powerful. And thus, all of this land you see here with forest was reclaimed within a few decades by the forest, by the creatures of the Grim, both benevolent and malevolent, dangerous and dark, and not so dangerous and dark, but maybe misunderstood, that got pushed away by the humans over the centuries. And then the people, the Urlanders, were pushed here in these coastal regions and kind of shut themselves off. And over the course of these 50 years, they built this here. You can see this, if you can see my mouse cursor here, this wall known as the boundary. As you can tell, it only goes here down to the Eagle River. I can zoom in here. You can see here the Eagle River by Zutzla and not beyond that. And that is, of course, not without its dangers, because here the Grim Reach can get across the river. It is not complete. There are certain gates, and there's been a little bit of a reclaiming. Now, there are, of course, creatures within the boundary, but most of them are outside of the boundary. And here you're looking at roads that go down to Klipburg, then Kobeling down here. If we can zoom in a little bit, you can see they have like a mini boundary going on that they built to protect themselves, but they are sailing along the coasts here. No one goes to Ash Isle anymore because, of course, the Grim also was unleashed in the Dark Sea. And as such, the Dark Sea had a different name once upon a time, but it's been renamed the Dark Sea over the last few decades just because of how dangerous it is. And with this, the whole continent got cut off from other parts of the planet, and nobody really wants to go on sea voyages. So the society has rebuilt itself. The empire, as it were, was dismantled because the emperor was lost. His heir went with him on the grand expedition, died as well. And the people wanted to rebuild a society, but they didn't want what they once had. So you have different versions here. You have some city-states, which is the majority of here. Some rule it very feudal. They've gone back in time. Some are more, let's look at it, Dutch Republic, 17th century. Some are more a Hansa, so a loose confederation here, and they all have domains. You can see here some of these denoted by this symbol. Those are the more major towns and cities that have domains. Think of it, Eschenfurt has the north, Zolmen has the middle here, Raxhafen down here, and Bogenburg, the one's major capital, is controlling this area. And they are also competing with each other for dominion of the boundary. So there is a political intrigue aspect here. But then also beyond that, we have Nordburg and Nordheim. Then Nebelung, Albenheim. Alben is Old German for elf. Hilltop. Then you have Wulfork, Fort Elman out here. And part of this is also now replicating some of the trade of the 17th century. Think of East India Company, the Hudson's Bay Company. They all came in the 17th century. And so it's kind of replicating that as well. There is, within Raxhafen, there is the House of Elixirs. That's kind of a, let's call it a guild, so to speak, a company that's looking to branch out and control the potion trade within the boundary. And for that, they need adventurers who will go beyond the boundary, because some of the most potent potions, at least the ingredients, are out in the Grim and the Barrow Hills, the Calaran Mountains, and that is replicated in the game itself. So I have noted what ingredients are out there for which potions, where you need to find them. Certain potions are illegal to be used because of the effects they have. Magic itself is also unpredictable, and I'll go into that in future ones where future videos where I talk about the mechanics and how you do things. And certain spells, incantations, as it were, are illegal to be spoken within town or within the boundaries. So magic users, sorcerers, are barred from entry in certain places because of the, at times, wild nature of magic. There are, again, fabled creatures all throughout the Grim Reach that I will introduce you to over time in a series of videos here. But here, this was kind of a primer of the setting, some of the inspirations, some of the stuff going on. As far as adventures, now, I kind of talked about this in the recent post on my blog, that the game loop of Darkness of Ur is about survival and exploration, is going beyond the boundary and trying to reclaim, setting up outposts, maybe building a business in trade and monster hunting and potion hunting. But there are also opportunities for discovery of lost places throughout these woods or towns, monasteries, castles, ruins that have been taken over by the Grimm. And maybe there are horrible creatures in there, and your adventurers are looking for cash and to make a name for themselves and, dungeon delving a little bit. But nobody has dark vision. So torches are needed. And you've got black powder weapons. So needless to say, you shoot that thing in a dungeon, it's going to have an effect on you. But you don't have to do that. You can also have adventures purely within the boundary. City intrigue, political intrigue, things like that are absolutely possible. But the game was designed to venture out and explore and survive and deal with the things in the Grim. Both human and monster alike. So if this sounds interesting to you, I do have a link down in the description to the playtest packet. I will say there is no setting primer yet in it. You can kind of use this video as a guide. I will write up and publish a setting primer and then an updated playtest packet. Again, playtest link down in the description to Patreon. Not behind a paywall. You can just grab it there. Future videos, I will also talk about more about character creation or adventure creation, as I call it, combat, magic, how to run the game, creatures you could encounter, and so on. So I hope you will join me in the process of working and designing Darkness of Ur. It's, I would say, 70% complete at this point, but more is still yet to come, especially as I do broad playtesting. If you enjoyed this, also link down in the description to my website blog, realmbuilderguy.com, where I also have kind of design journals that I'm going to be writing over the course of time. If you enjoyed this, please hit like, and to really help this grow, sharing would also go a long way. So until next time, I am Matthias, also known as Realm Builder Guy, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.